Awesome. So we're recording on both Facebook and Zoom. And welcome everybody to the Leading LDS weekly leadership webinar. This has been something I've personally been looking forward to each week on Saturday as we delve into various topics that maybe we've addressed on the podcast or just on leadinglds.org. And a few housekeeping items is I want to plug the 2018 ward calendar that we're in the process of doing a crowdfunding campaign for. If you go to leadinglds.org, there's a link right there on the homepage. We need to raise a certain amount or get a certain amount of orders in for that calendar in order to cover the costs of doing the first run. And so for $20, you can get your ward calendar, which is a year-long calendar. It looks great in a bishop's office, clerk's office, or on a ward bulletin board. And just one of the many ways we try and add value to the Leading LDS community. As far as upcoming webinars, I just confirmed with Ryan Gottfredson, who we've had on the webinar before. He just wrote an article on Leading LDS about the I should have it in front of me. But as far as the divide of progressive and Orthodox Mormons and how we can bridge that divide and really default to love, right? I think we could all agree on that. And so really interesting research that he's done, and we're going to dive into that and ask further questions. So tune in next week for that one. And as far as also, I'm in 1 hour is when the Motab Christmas concert tickets, what do they call it? I mean, you can reserve your Motab tickets. So hopefully we'll get done in time for everybody to jump on there and reserve your Motab Christmas tickets. If you're outside of Utah, I encourage you to do the same. But when you get the tickets, just send them to me and then I'll go. So, all right. And then as far as like past webinars, we've had some incredible webinars and topics discussed. And what we are trying to do here is create more value for value. So if you're a core leader with Leading LDS, you have access to the core leadership library that has all of the past webinars and topics that we've talked about. I'm hoping this week or next week, we should have a separate core leader podcast stream that will just feed you the webinar audio on your favorite podcasting app, and you'll be able to access it that way. So definitely a time to go to leadinglds.org, hit the donate button, become a core leader, which a core leader is not just a donor, but a donor that's on a subscription basis, sort of set it and forget it. Whether you donate $1 a month, $12 a year, $5 a month, $100 a year, whatever it is, whatever you can afford that's not going to break your budget. That's what allows us to fuel this machine and bring more and more fantastic content to you. So as always with Zoom, you can ask questions in the chat window, or there's a Q&A function there if you want to remain anonymous. Or on Facebook Live, you can just ask in the comments, and I'll be monitoring that as we go and make sure that all your questions are asked that way. So on to our topic today. Back when I was bishop, I remember every year around Christmas, we would send out a Christmas newsletter. And of course, we did this for the intent of wishing everybody a Merry Christmas in our ward. And even those that, we blast this out to everybody on the rolls. And really, maybe the secondary and maybe sometimes it felt like the primary reason we did this is to clean up our records, because a few weeks after, we would get this stack of envelopes back from return addresses, right? Because they have moved. And I was in a very transient ward, so it was generally a big stack. And this is how we would justify cleaning up our records. And it worked for the most part, right? So on that address or on that envelope, it would have a forwarding address for the most part, or it would just tell us that they'd moved, and we could take steps after that. And you can imagine that sending out a stamped letter to every record on the rolls got very expensive, right? And of course, we had the budget for it. It wasn't that it was breaking us, and I'm sure many of you do this. During this time, somebody reached out to me. I think the last couple of years as a bishop, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, have you heard of Melissa data? You can actually clean up your records, streamline this process. It's not required for you to spend all that money of putting stamps on envelopes and sending them out to so many people, but you can still accomplish, figuring out who's moved and what their forwarding address is. And so I thought, well, let's check it out. I actually recommended it to my stake president. The state clerk used Melissa data on I think we had 5,000 or so records in our stake, and really just cleaned up in the records for such a minimal price compared to putting a stamp on every envelope to do that. So of course we still send out the Christmas newsletter because we're jolly fellows that want to wish people Merry Christmas, but that wasn't our primary intent to clean up the records. And we knew that as we mailed those, they're actually getting to somebody. So with that, I've been in touch with Melissa Data, and they've been kind enough. Christian Snow has been kind enough to join us in this webinar and teach us a little bit about Melissa Data. So Christian, how are you? I can't hear you if you're on mute. Looks like you're muted. Unmute. Okay, there you go. Christian, how are you?
Yes, very well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
I was looking at the chat and I saw that some people may not be able to hear me. If you can't, I've got a little fix going on, but if you can, I think we're ready to go.
As long as I can hear you, we're getting it on the record, and so no need to worry. So you're good. So where are you from, Christian? Give us a little background on you personally.
Well, I am originally from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, really?
I moved to California about 16 years ago, and reside currently in Southern California, Orange County.
Nice. A little bit better weather there.
Yes, sir.
Nice. So you get the Mormon world a little bit. You've come from our world.
Yes, I definitely understand it. I was, like I said, immersed in it for the good better part of 25 years.
Nice.
So, yeah, we are very familiar with the culture and very familiar with with exactly what you're trying to do today.
Oh, awesome. Well, I think it'll be good that some of the jargon that we deal with stakes and wards, and you understand the dynamic of ward boundaries and how people come and go, and they can move, especially in Utah, they can move 3 streets over and be in a different ward, or different stake for that matter. So where do we want to start on this, and maybe just give us a background on what Melissa Data is, and obviously you're not a company that just helps Mormon churches, but what's the overall scope of what Melissa Data does?
Correct. Melissa Data is a data quality company. We've been in business for a little over 35 years. Initially, the business started out as an NCOA, or National Change of Address provider for the United States Post Office, dealt with a lot of bulk mailings. And over the years, as Melissa Data, or Melissa Global as it's now called, has acquired a lot of information, address data, as they went through being a vendor for the United States Post Office. They started to correlate some of that data together. So over the last maybe 5 to 6 years, we've really been in the contact data enrichment and verification space. So we deal with many large clients, many small clients, people with personal businesses, with just them as the sole employee. So we deal across the board with different types of businesses, but our core products revolve around the address quality space.
Nice. So there's companies obviously with databases, whether they're clients or vendors that they want to keep those records updated, and you use public information to update that.
Correct. We have a number of trusted sources. So that's one of our, I guess, totes that we like to do, is that we multi-source all of our data, trusted industry sources, whether it's the address data, people's individual, whether it's phone number or email address, and property data as well.
Awesome. And I'm sharing the screen here as far as your website, people get familiar with it. One thing I want to mention is we go through this. Melissa Day has been kind enough to set up an affiliate link for leading LDS so that, they can throw a few peanuts our way as we send business their way. So as you go to Melissa Data, the best way to go to it, to bookmark, is go to melissadata.com/LDS. And that way we'll get credit for sending you there. And as you create an account and use this, some of that money will come back to leading LDS and help us continue to create resources. So definitely bookmark that. Well, I'll let you, do you want to start with sharing your screen, and we can, let's see, let me stop sharing. And then, yeah, Christian, if you want to share your screen, and then we can, you can walk us through it. Is that, I guess, where do we start as far as just creating an account?
Yes, creating an account is very simple. Let me go ahead and go back to actually that screen there. So again, my apologies for the lag of the computer here, but when you go to melissa.com, you will see right over here to the left, and actually, I'm sorry, that is where, there we go. Right here to the top right, there is a My Account drop down. If you drop that down and go to Sign In, it will actually bring you to a page where it gives you an opportunity to log in. Right below that, if you do not have a Melissa Data account, you can create the account now by clicking that link. And it will come up and it will give you some simple basic fields to input. First name, last name are the required fields. And then you can put your company, select the industry. Industry is required. However, there is an other at the bottom of the dropdown. And then email and password are required. If you have any primary interest outside of this, or you can choose one of these options: mailing software, mailing list, free lookups, DQT or in DES. And if you want to put comments just indicating that you are looking for the listware for LDS, you can place that in there. You click the submit button, and that will just basically send you an email to your email address that you registered with. And it will have a verification link. Once you click that link, it will take you back to the verification page and you're ready to go.
Awesome.
So from there, you will be able to use that link that Kurt shared, and you'll be able to go in and purchase credits, and I'll explain how the credit model works here in just a moment when we get, actually once we've gone through the demonstration of the processing of the tool. Now, can you see my Excel page?
Yep, I see it.
Excellent.
All my ward members. No, I'm just kidding. This is dummy data, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a demo data. So anybody whose name is on here, they have agreed to provide.
Oh, okay.
Because
right.
we do need some true data for the tool to work. Otherwise, you're just going to get a bunch of returns saying, "Hey, this really doesn't match."
Yeah.
And to explain a little bit what I mean by that, of course, we can validate the addresses as long as they're a true address. We don't need a name associated with that. But if you want to correlate that someone does truly belong to that address, you obviously need their name. And then if you want to go a step further and correlate or append a phone number, if you're missing a phone number or an email address, you'll need a real name to do that. With that said, once you have your records in Excel, you want to parse them out. You can combine the name if you have a company name. The address, the best way, if you can parse out the street address versus the city and state and zip code, that is how the tool will work. I know that there are tools out there that will parse for you. We have one that we offer. However, it is a little pricey. So if you do want to take advantage of that, you're looking in the range for that tool. The subscription annually is about $2,500.
Hmm.
I'll let you know that it's out there. I don't expect anybody to take advantage of it, though.
Yeah. So, and explain again, what does that do exactly?
That tool I speak of will parse when you export the information or extract the information from your database.
Hmm.
And there are sometimes where the address is completely in one cell.
Right.
So you'll have the city, state, and zip code in one cell.
Okay.
To parse that out into individual columns.
Gotcha. And so this is good to just to add to this, this step is all of you, hopefully if you're a ward clerk or if you don't know how to do this, ask the ward clerk. As far as exporting the data, you can do that easily by logging into LDS.org, going to the directory, and there should be an export option. I think it's only available for people in leadership like bishoprics and such or stake presidencies. And so once you export it, you can export it into a CSV and then open it in Excel. And this is how it's going to look. And then, yeah, like Christian said, the address box is going to group all that together. So I've searched for an easy fix, and there may not be one. So you may have to have a clerk or somebody go through and on every box just put each part of the address in a different box. And Christian, that's the address number, the street, the city, the state, and the zip code should all be in separate cells, right?
Correct. All right. Now, one thing I will go over in more detail once we've gone through this is exactly how to download the Listware plugin. You'll see up here at the top that at the very end I have a new tab called Listware. Essentially, when you download the Listware app, it will go through, require you to put in let me back up there. You guys will be using credits, so you will not have to put in a license key, but it will have you go through and install the plugin into your Excel. Once it's installed, you'll have this new tab, and you'll have all of these options as far as processing the data. What you guys are going to be focused on, and I can go into detail on these other tabs or these other options, but the US and Canada check and verify.
Okay.
This is what's going to go through and verify the addresses. Like I said, the other information, if you want to, if you have international addresses for any reason, if you have business information, if you're doing a deduplication, those are all of these other options. But it's the very first option which everyone is going to use.
Yeah. And I think that's good to clarify. So obviously US and Canada is covered, but even if there's somebody in, I don't know, Mexico listening or, you have international options as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. And it would be the same process that you just hit you hit the global instead of US and Canada?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, just to give a brief overview of these other buttons, Smart Mover, NCOA, this is National Change of Address. There's actually a piece built into the check and verify option that will identify moves. But if you need anything official for the United States Post Office through the National Change of Address, we have that option as well. This is for business information, express entry. That's actually not something that anyone's going to necessarily be worried about. This is if you want to integrate this with any type of web page or web form to fill out, where one could start typing in a few keystrokes and it will drop down to choices of valid addresses.
Gotcha. Okay.
Matchup is the deduplication, identifying any duplicates. And in sales leads, that's one of our lists for different sales demographics.
Okay. And for this discussion, as far as a clerk just cleaning up his records, he's just going to focus on that US and Canada. Unless he's international, he'll focus on the global, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So once you have all of your records in Excel, you simply just click the US and Canada, It's going to open up a window to the side here, and it's going to think about it for a moment. But essentially what this is the settings for the information you're going to process. You're going to choose, and I'll go through this as it's loading so that we can go right through it when it pops up. But it will have you choose the data range, the field of data that you want to process. Once you've chosen that, it will take you to another screen, and we'll be able to choose exactly the pieces of information that we want to process. So with that said, oops, sorry about that. Just go ahead and choose these records for this range, and we select that data to process. It will give you an indication of all of the data in the range that's being processed. You click the next button, and then this gives you the options that you want to do. As I mentioned, check was going to check the address, make sure the address is a true address and standardized to USPS CAS certification. Verify is going to correlate that the name and the address go together. Move update is that national change of address piece that will identify any moves that that we have in our sources. So this top one, if they moved from 5807 Goldstrand to 4 Tisbury Way, it's going to indicate that on the output. Now these other options are appending information. So if you have a phone, if you're missing a phone number or an email that you want to append, you can choose those. If you're missing the name, but you have the address, you can choose to append that. Or if you have the address and phone number, generally you need 2 data elements to be able to append. So if you have an address and phone number, you could append the address. Now these append rates, I will say, are generally about a 35 to 40% hit rate. So I want to set the expectation that if you do need to append information, it is the caveat if we have that available in our database. So once we've chose what we want to do, in this case, we have emails and phone numbers, so I'm not going to append those. I'm just going to go through, check the address, make sure that it correlates to that person, and look for any move updates. Click the next button. It's going to bring us to our input columns. So once I have headers on my columns, it's very easy. It will map those pretty easily. If we go to next, it's going to talk about our output columns. Now you'll be able to identify or outputs a few different ways. So name, you can have the full name. You can have it parsed into first name and the last name. And then gender is a demographic that we offer as well. You can choose that. And then the address, again, if you want to include a country or an address key. Address key is something that we use for every address in the country that is static. It will never change. So if there's any type of record that you need to keep very consistent, and this really doesn't happen, but sometimes I know they do some renaming of streets. I bring this up just because I dealt with a customer or a county that just did this, where they completely renamed streets and created new addresses. So that's something where you would want to make sure you have that address key if you needed to keep track of that. And then some other information that you might be interested in is maybe the census information. If I can open that up. if you need any of this congressional district or state district, there is also, I believe, county name if you ever needed to identify the county name as well.
Hmm.
That can, again, just because I know the boundaries of wards and stakes are fairly concentrated, I don't know that you're going to really have any issues with county, but I know some people need that information in their records.
Yeah, maybe outside of Utah. And
exactly.
yeah.
So there's a lot of information. I'm not going to go through each and every piece, but again, one thing I do want to look at is demographics. If you wanted any of these demographics, date of birth, date of death, household income, residence type, length of residence, occupation, married or not, presence of children, we have those options available as well.
Oh, wow. And this is all like, I mean, I'm just amazed by how detailed you can get, and it's all just public information, or?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. We generally will get most of our data from United States Post Office, as I mentioned, being a national change of address vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for our property information, it's the last piece I was going to go into there. CoreLogic is the most trusted resource for property information. Generally, they deal with most of the assessor's offices across the if you need any of the property information, basically anything you can think of as far as property, you can get that information. So from value, mortgage amount, number of bedrooms, year built, you have all that information available.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's pertinent to you for this, but that just wanted to give an example of the wide array of data available.
And so if a ward clerk just wants to know, if they've moved and where, they would just use the name and the address sections.
Yep.
Okay.
And normally, what the default options are going to be just fine. You really
Oh, okay.
Customize any.
Gotcha.
Again, just to let you know what's in there. Feel free to play around. You're not going to break anything. You're always going to have your original data saved. So we're not going to do anything with that data.
Yeah.
And on that point, let me actually touch on this. I know that there is much concern about privacy with anybody's personal information. One thing that Melissa Data has done, and over the last, I think we're in our third year, we have a SOC 2 certification, which is basically indication that we are very, very heavily tested on our security as far as any data that passes through us. And the data that we have, we don't necessarily keep. So if you provide us data, we don't keep any of that data. We will go through the process, append anything, verify it, but we don't keep your data. We only keep the data that we get from our industry sources.
Gotcha.
We have a HIPAA certification that we just obtained earlier this year. So we have been doing a lot more business in the medical community because we have that certification as well. And that one was not easy to get. So the reason I bring those things up is to know that the data that you process through here is going to be very, very safely processed.
Yeah, so there's not you're not some smart computer guy in your basement that's figured out how to manipulate public data. I mean, there's some hoops you've jumped through in order to be secure and have some of these credentials.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess what's happening is obviously when you export the ward list, you're not necessarily uploading it to Melissa Data. You're keeping it all locally in your computer with Excel. And then as you run these tests, it's just sort of, it's sending the information back and forth. Is that a good way to, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. It's hitting our web service, which we then, again, compare your data against our data, and then the outputted results show exactly that.
Great.
So I'm going to go ahead and hit next once we've chosen all of our, details of the output. We click next. And this is just talking about a reporting page that will populate. You don't have to create the report, but this will get a nice little colorful report that will give you some great analytics on the data we processed. With that said, I'm going to click next, and it just gives a quick review of everything, the settings, the data range, the options we chose, and we go ahead and click process. Now, I mentioned to Kurt before we started that I'm having a little trouble with this computer processing, so I'm going to give this a few minutes to process. If it doesn't process, I actually have the completed version ready to go, so I can just switch over to that file.
Okay. But yeah, we can take a minute.
Perfect. This is not a reflection of the time it will take. Like I said, I had a bit of a computer breakdown last night. So I'm using my daughter's computer.
Oh, nice.
There's a little pet shop and slime videos taking up the memory, I believe. So,
I bet. But usually it's like, I mean, less than a minute it's going to process. I mean, most wards, I don't know how many records you have in this spreadsheet, but most wards, if they have 500 records, I mean, it's not going to take too long. Right?
It's going to be under 2 minutes to process that. One thing I will mention is that this will results in each column. If there's a new address, it'll list the new address. But we also have a result code column, which the result codes are AV01, AS02, which mean nothing to you, just right out of the box. But those indicate what we did to the record, or if the record is 100% ready to go and completely okay.
Mm-hmm.
I will direct you to a link that will give you those result codes, but also embedded within the result or in the columns with the result codes, it will give some comments. You get that little red triangle up at the top of the cell. If you hover over it, it'll show you the comments.
Mm-hmm.
It will embed those comments when you process this. If you do experience where you're running, and this generally only happens when you're running, thousands of records at once, but there are times where it will take a long time to process. If you simply choose the option to go ahead and omit or not choose the option to have those comments in there, it will process much, much quicker.
Okay.
Now, it looks like it finished up. So it says worksheet 1 is now ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and close that notification. I'm going to close out this box to the side in a moment. This goes through and tells us the results very quickly. There were 162 good names, 1 empty name. There were 7 company names, and in that company field, there were 156 were empty. Addresses, 151 were good, 12 were bad, 25 were corrected, 141 were verified, and 46 moved. So again, it gives that little color coding to these results, which you'll see. Close out of this so I can scroll over. You'll see this column A through I is my original data. Now, as I scroll over, columns J forward are my output columns.
And they're all color coded to those different changes.
Anything that was verified or looked for a move, that information is color coded here. But again, as I mentioned, it's little comment section. Street suffix changed to street, so ST. Or it looks like it appended that ST. So you'll see the original address was 5807 Goldstrand. And we appended the street suffix. So as I mentioned, this will format the address to USPS preferred standards. So all the street names will go to ST instead of street, if there is a USPS preferred way. There are some places that it doesn't matter to them if it's spelled out street or abbreviated as ST. But this will give, if there is a preferred USPS method, it will indicate that when it appends that street suffix.
And so this is, this is all the information that we need. Everything's updated in the colored areas, and then from here is when we just now adjust our records, right?
Correct. Now, you can go off the color coding and look for that. Like I see this one right away, 3377 Carmel Mountain Road. The result code is AE09, which means suite or apartment is missing. So we don't have, we're not going to guess the information. If we're not 100% sure that it is going to be, that we can correct it, whether it's appending, street or avenue, or, change if a number is transposed in the address, we won't take it upon ourselves to correct that if we think it might be correct.
Yeah.
So if there's multiple options for that, we're not gonna touch it. We're gonna tell you, hey, something's missing here. You're gonna have to do a little investigation on your own.
Sure. And then on the email column, all those in dark green are updated emails.
Let's see here. So invalid mailbox name. So this did actually an email verification as well. So this went and checked to make sure that the email is working, and in these cases, they weren't.
So the green ones are broken emails, or they don't work.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And syntax was corrected. So if there is like this one here, let me go ahead and look at the syntax over here. So we had the asterisks after the .com. If we go over here, we remove those asterisks. So there's algorithms in here that understand the correct syntax of an email. We're not going to guess the domain. That can be, if it comes through as a corrected, or I'm sorry, as a verified email box, then you can bet that is a correct domain. But if they can't deliver an email to that domain, it's going to come back as a bad email.
Gotcha. But at least, we have updated addresses here, and that's our main goal, right? To see as far as where people have gone and where to send the records to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I remember when we did this, we did it, I figured it makes sense just to do it as a stake, since then we can cover all the wards. And so I had the state clerk do it. And then I remember the state clerk just sorted this file, because if there's no color, that means there's no change, right?
Correct.
And so he just sorted it, all the colored ones, and then split it up into wards, and each ward got a spreadsheet file with all the changes, and the clerk went through and one by one updated them into the system. I don't believe there's a way with the MLS or LCR that you can just automatically just upload a spreadsheet and update all these records. If there is, please let us know, but I don't think there is. So your clerk would just have to go through one by one and update those, and then obviously with the forward the record to whichever ward is the new address, and that record is where it's supposed to be. So
now, one thing I will mention also is that if you have any information that you've extracted from your database that has nothing to do with addresses, any of the verification, we won't do anything with that information. So you can export everything you need, and if you have a specific field that you need to indicate, and what brought this to my mind is I do have a customer that they have a field, a customer record number that they use to import the records back in and overwrite the existing record, and they do it by that customer ID that they have. So, guys, like I said, I just wanted to make it known that if you have any columns of information that have nothing to do, we're not going to verify, we're not going to do anything with, you'll always keep that information on the file. So, like I said, all of your original input information in the columns will be just as you left them. And then output columns, which will be indicated by this MD underscore, and then full name. Generally, we'll just mimic the column headers that you originally put in. It'll just put in the MD underscore prior to it.
Yeah, that's good to mention, just so it's not like the clerk has to go through and remove columns if it isn't pertinent to the data that you have, right? It'll just remain as it is.
Correct.
Great.
Now, one thing I want to show you this probably the final thing on the outputted results is you can go through and look at the color code and highlight over and look at the what it says. But if you want to just get down and identify, all right, what's good, what do I not have to worry about? We just know that it's good. Is you can sort by these result codes.
Okay.
So
that's great.
If I filter, oops, just kidding there. Sorry about that. If you put a filter on there, and AS01 is the gold standard. Let's see if I can see that. You'll see AS01, the address is valid and deliverable. Means that you're good to go. You can take the outputted results and just go with those. If there's not an AS01, that means that there's still something wrong there and it has not been verified. Now, it shows all these other codes to tell you what we did to the record, but ultimately, if an AS01 is there, it means that the outputted results are completely ready to go and valid.
Yeah, so that's the golden ticket, right? That we have something we can do there.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to explain the last three columns here, the results columns. The check results are strictly the address. It's saying that, hey, this address checks out. We did some changes. We added street. The apartment number checked out. Everything's good. We're only looking at the address information. To verify, these are the results of correlating the data to that person. So VRO1 in this case, contact name and address match. Email not found in the reference data. So we can't guarantee that email is correlated to them. But we know that the address and the person, they go together. So VRO4, partial address match. So these come into play really. I don't know that the verify piece is going to be huge for what you guys are doing. Simply, again, because if you have an address and the name of the person there, you've gained that information from somewhere. The only time that it may be sorry about that. The only time that we may be, I guess, of importance to you, or not even to you, but in general, is when you have, you want to make sure that that person, I guess, correlates with that address. The third column is actually the move results, so that's separate. So these will indicate if there was any change of address detected. So anything that has a population in this column is indicating there's a move. So I'm going to go on this line 6. The original address is 5201 Sandhill Road. We came up with a new address of 13011 Caminito Maravilla. But this is going to show any moves. So the ones that you want to identify probably immediately are these move results, which are very simple. AS12 indicates there's a move. And in the check results, the AS01 indicating that it's fully validated address.
Awesome. That's good. And when I did, I just ignored all those codes. So it's good to know that they can actually be helpful.
Absolutely. One thing I will show you really quick, and I will send this to you, Kurt, and you can, let's see. You can provide this link. If you can see the screen that I'm sharing, the Melissa Data website. Under the support is the product support wiki.
Great.
A little intimidating at first, at least to me, because I'm not the most technical person as far as coding and programming and all that fun stuff. And there's a lot of programming language when you get into this area. But simply on the menu bar on the left, there is result codes under the popular section. You click on result codes, and I'll be the first to admit that our website's not the easiest to navigate, but it's easy to find.
You're all data geeks, it's just
exactly. So North American Cloud Services, and it is Personator is what's driving the results. So you click on Personator, and it's going to think about it for a moment. There we go. It's going to give you a big, long list of the different result codes and what they mean.
Great. Good to reference that.
The short description, which is what is embedded in the Excel sheet, and then the long description, which gives a little more detail if that doesn't make any sense to you, which, we live and die by acronyms sometimes.
Right.
And you'll see a lot of acronyms in there. But you'll see there's a lot of result codes, and they start at address status, which is RAS, address error, AE, address change, email status, email error, geocoding, name status. So there's a lot of result codes here for you to find a bunch of free time to go over. Or just
if you can't sleep at night, you can come read your codes.
There you go.
That's awesome. Great. So is that the gist of it? I mean, that's
absolutely, yeah, it is. One thing I do want to show really quick is
please do.
There is a nice little graph if you want analytics on the data. It will go through and tell you what was done. So the second tab, the input columns, the output columns, the processing results, and then a nice little graph of the data.
Nice. The clerk can impress the bishop with some colored graphs. So.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly. Let everybody know the time and effort that it took you to put in to create this information.
Yeah.
And it will also give you the count of the result codes.
Okay. That's good. I wasn't aware of that tab. That's helpful.
So yeah, it's a very simple tool. You just a little direction, helps make it that much easier to use. But it's very powerful. There's a lot of functionality in here. As I mentioned, we deal with a lot of different businesses. There are, a lot of different functions within the listware tab, dealing with, like I said, the property information. If you know, I don't know that you guys would need it for what you're doing, but
Right.
geocode is something that has been very popular over the last few months. But there's just a number of things that you can do with this. So whether it's for dealing with reward business, if it's anything that you can use on a personal level or a business level, uh, it has the capability and functionality.
That's great. Now, what about you mentioned as far as cost, because you have to sort of load your account with credits, right? And I think you get a certain amount of credits free just by signing up. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm gonna when you go to the link that Kurt provided with the listware /LDS. Let me pull that. Where did we go? That's not it. There we go. Let me go up here. Actually, I'm going to start from the screen where you guys will land when you go to that link. So here's where we'll talk about listware. And then when you go down in this section where it says listware, it says learn more about listware credits. There's a link. You can kind of tell that it's a link that says learn about listware credits. This will bring you to the pricing for the credits. And this is where you can activate your 1,000 free credits. So once you've created an account and you're logged in, if you click activate, you'll get a little indication that, hey, you have your free credits are ready to go. You have 1,000 free credits. When you need to purchase more credits, you can go to any one of these tiers and buy now, and it will just bring you to a checkout screen. I'll show you that in a moment. One thing I did want to do is if you scroll down, this will give you the credit pricing. So as I mentioned, the check will validate the address. The verify will cross-reference that make sure the name and the address go together. The move update will give you the move. This indicates the number of credits that those actions cost per record. For the verify, I don't think you really need to verify that the name and address go together. I believe that you're going to know generally within your wards or stakes if Joe Smith doesn't live at 123 Main Street. So that's a way to save with processing credits by not choosing that verify piece. Again, the important things are making sure that the address itself is valid, so you can get make sure that it's deliverable for any mailings, and then the move update to identify if that individual has moved. And then if you want to append any information, this gives you the credit cost for that. And then as you go down for the different options, those buttons in the listware tab gives you the description as well as the price per record that it's going to cost you in credits.
Yeah, and so essentially, if you just want to do the address, I mean, that's just pretty much one credit per record, right?
Yep.
And you can see, I mean, if at those prices, it's tons cheaper than sending out putting a stamp on every one of those envelopes and sending it out. So, you could easily do the Melissa data, the listware process, and then send out all those envelopes, and you'll save your ward probably hundreds of dollars. So.
Absolutely. The time investment that it takes to, signing up, downloading, spending probably the $30 that you'll need to spend to process your records for probably I would imagine the year, uh, it's going to save you so much more than having to deal with one by one the cost of postage, then the research into those return mail pieces to find out, okay, what do I do with this? Is it a wrong address? Did they move? Um, what's going on here? This
Yeah.
is far cheaper in the long run to spend the $30 and the 30 minutes to get everything processed than it would to the time and cost later.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. If there's any questions that haven't been covered or items you want to ask Christian, go ahead and type them in the chat or the question box, and we can review those as we wrap up here. But Christian, anything else we haven't covered?
You know what? For what we've set out today, I believe that we've hit just about everything. Again, if there's any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. And
Yeah.
I hope that the volume issues were resolved, and I apologize on my end for any.
Yeah.
Any
No, I think this has worked out great, so no need to sweat that. Steve was asking, as far as adding that tab, that listware tab in Excel. From what I understand, this is when you go to melissadata.com/LDS, it'll take you directly to the listware product page where you can create an account and then download. It's just basically a bit of software that that Excel will recognize and add that tab, right?
Correct. And I can also send you the direct link as well, Kurt.
Okay.
If you want to post that somewhere, but it
Yeah.
should within there to identify when they go to that link, it should take them to a spot to be able to download that plugin.
Yeah.
Again, I'll send you the direct link to downloading the plugin, and any questions, anyone can feel free to contact me. I will, let's see. I don't want to take time logging into my account to show you my auto signature. So I will just tell you that my name is Christian Snow. It's christian.snow@melissa.com.
Awesome. Any other questions? Let's see here.
And I'm looking at the chat as well. And Nate, if you have a macro that you can share, that would be amazing for me.
Yeah, so what Nate is referring to is when you export it from MLS or LCR, it'll have the address all in one cell. And you can see by Christian's example, they need to be in separate cells from address, city, state, zip code. And so our brilliant Nate is going to put a macro together, and maybe maybe you and I can put a quick video together just to show people how to use that, because that'll save you a good hour or two of separating everything into separate cells, or you can do it the old-fashioned way of just going one by one and doing that, but that would definitely be helpful.
Absolutely.
So, well, thanks, Christian. Again, if I'm going to check Facebook one more time here and make sure that there's no questions there. But as we wrap up, send Chris just comment here with Christian thanking him for doing this, and like he gave his email, so you can go in and make this or contact him if you have any specific questions. And I'd love for those of you that do jump into this and do it, please reach out to me. I'd love to get your feedback on how it worked, and even if it would just work perfectly. I mean, hopefully that works that way. Or any hurdles you run into, let us know. We can clarify that as we post the recording of this webinar. So, okay, let's see. There's a few more questions here. No, those are done. Perfect. Well, Christian, I appreciate your time, and I'm gonna stop the Facebook live stream here. Stop that. and then stop the recording as well.